Hello there, good evening. Welcome to this month's Janome Stitch Club UK. My name is Julia. I'm one of the Janome educators, and every month we try and go through some of the features, stitches, feet, etc. on your Janome machines, just to get you using a few more things maybe that you haven't looked at before, and get your creative juices flowing. Now, last month I promised you something a little bit different, and I think that's kind of what we've got. So summer holidays are coming up, so you may not have that much time to play on your machine, but tonight is all about playing, frankly. Those of you that have got lots of stitches, and those of you that actually maybe haven't got that many, like a lot of things in your house, like your washing machine, microwave, etc., you probably find that you just use the same couple of settings over and over again. So what we're going to do is try and force the issue a little bit and make you look at some of those stitches in a slightly different way. Very often the stitches that you've got on your machine, you look at them and go, well, okay, that's fine, no idea what to do with it. One of the best ways to do it, as I discovered during lockdown actually, was I played a little game with called Stitch Bingo. And at the time I was doing regular lives for my classes. Obviously we couldn't meet, so we were just trying to keep things going and keep people sewing, and this was the thing that I came up with. It started as a game where basically I used to put up the stitch card on the machine I was on, and people could send me in any 3 stitches, and then I had to make a picture out of it. I was allowed to use the straight stitches and the zigzag stitch as well. But what happened was it just made me really look at what was going on with the machine, and actually it really did spark off some imagination, not just for me but for everyone else as well. So I thought maybe it was time that we took a little trip back to Stitch Bingo. Now, you don't need to do this, but what I've got is, this is my Stitch Bingo box, okay, and I've got all the stitches cut up and laminated from the stitch card. You'll get one in the back normally of your instruction book, so you could just print it out onto card and cut them up if you wanted to. Don't feel you have to get this involved. And then just pick yourself a few stitches out, stitch them out and see what happens. So what I've done this week is I've picked out, I think it was 5 stitches. I haven't put any of the utility stitches, like the boring ones, in here because, as I say, you are allowed to use the straight stitch and the zigzag stitches. So I've just gone for like the fancy ones. So do whatever you want, but I think sometimes it's a good idea, just pick a few out, get yourself some fabric and then have a little play. So what I'm looking at tonight is the stitches that I picked out, and I'm going to go through those in a minute. Made me think of a sort of beach scene. So basically I'm looking at doing things like this, okay? So the stitches that came out, this is kind of where we're going with it. And I've had a little bit of a play with some of the other stitches. So even if you don't have the exact stitches that I'm going to look at on the Atelier, you will have something similar. What I have got, and I've done this sort of in class since lockdown, but you know, I've got the instruction books and stitch cards for all sorts of models of machine in here, and there's nearly always a stitch that's similar or that you can find. But frankly, there's going to be enough stitches to play with. And that's the idea of this, is just, as I say, making you look at the stitches and maybe thinking outside the box a little bit and getting a little bit creative. Now, the first thing you need to do is to do a background. So as this is not a painting lesson, I have used watercolour, Inktense watercolour sticks to do my background. I'm just going to do a really quick run through. I'm going to speed it up and just put some music over it of how to get your sort of background up. If you don't have watercolour pencils or anything or watercolours, bear in mind this is a picture. It's not necessarily going to be washed or worn or anything like that, so anything goes at this point. I very often just use wax crayons, just cheapy old wax crayons will do the job. Just, it's a light hand. So as I say, I'm just going to do a quick little video on how to get the background done. Then we'll go to the machine and look at the stitches and how we're actually going to approach the stitches for the project. Now I've got my background all done, it's dried, I've put on some interfacing, and what I now want to do is look at those stitches that we picked out. I would say randomly, but let's face it, I have done a little bit of cheating, but you know, it's my game, my rules. So this is the Pebbles one, and I've just randomly stitched them. I've changed the size on a couple of those and I've stacked them as well. And I think that's going to look really nice down the front here, just for a little bit of detail along these bits of the dune here. So happy with that one. And I will probably do that in a variegated thread, just because it will change the colour. Either the brown, or I might have a grey. If I've got a mixed grey, I might go with that. I'll have a look at that in a bit. I stitched out this feather one, and again, this is what I always do with these stitches. I go with, this is the serving suggestion as it comes up on the machine, and then I've messed around with changing the width settings here. So I've started with it really narrow, and then I've actually fattened it out as I go down, and I'm going to show you a couple of ways of doing that depending on your machine. So that what you get is a much more organic type of stitch, especially for these grassy ones. Okay, so it starts off thin and then it fattens out as it would if it was being a bit more natural. So happy with that one, and that's what's going to fill the front here. I then had a look at this curly whirly one, which is the one that made me think originally when I picked them out of a Seascape. Now I stitched this out, and I stitched it out in variegated. I hadn't used this one before, and it kind of doubled it, which was lovely. But when I did it on my little sort of test piece, it's too much. For this particular project, I thought it was actually too much. If I was doing something a little bit more stylised, then yes, I would probably use that. But I didn't think it worked. So what I'm actually going to go with on the C is, if you can see here, I've just used the straight stitch, just your regular straight stitch. I've taken the stitch length right down with a variegated thread, so that it's just going to change, because that's actually quite a flat C rather than a rough C, isn't it? So it wasn't quite the look I was going for, and as I say, my game, my rules. So that is the one that on this occasion I'm not going to use. These little stars here, again, stitch those out. And that was the thing that made me think of, here we go, look, stitching those over the top I'm not very good on flowers, those spiky ones that you get. I'm never going to get a job on Gardener's World, but I think you know what I mean, that tend to be either pink or yellow or something like that. So I thought they would look lovely. So that one, very happy with that, and I know exactly where I'm going to put that one. And another star stitch, this one here. Now I say a star stitch when it actually comes up. This is the French knot stitch, but it is tiny little stars. Now I've stitched it out here, and I've got like a sort of a ziggy-zaggy one on the atelier. And what I wanted to point out to you is that there are a few stitches that, can you see in between, there's almost like a jump thread. So it stitches one, then it jumps across, stitches the other one. And what that means is that, if I can grab my scissors, if I then go in and cut that thread, that long thread in between, like that, and then just turn it over, which one did I just do? This one. And get under the bobbin, and then I just give it a little sort of tug. This is what I do with lettering as well, because you do get that jump between your, if you've got lettering on your machine as well. And this is a quick way of getting rid of those. So look, what you've got there is nothing in between, and they are locked off, and they will actually stay like that. But that's great if you want like a, you know, starry night or something like that, or on this occasion just some tiny little flowers along the front maybe. So yeah, very happy with that one. So I think that was all of them, wasn't it? So that's given us quite a good starting point. I've put a variegated in the machine. It's slightly darker than the other one, but look, can you see it's quite a good match for all the colours that are already in here. It's got a little bit of brown in it as well, so I think that's going to look really nice just to do a little bit of detail stitching on the sea. I'm not going to do tons of work on the sea because I don't want it to get too thick, so that when I get to this point I'm going to struggle with those thicker stitches on here. It's quite a small project. There are ways of doing that, but I'm not going to go through that today. So I'm going to just start in with that straight stitch and do some stitching here. And at this point I'm going to speed you up a little bit and just show you, because you won't want to watch this entire process, because I can assure you I will get in the zone and I will probably be here for hours and hours, and you don't want to watch that. So this is my finished sea, and then I'm thinking, oh, do I need a little bit maybe of silver in it? So I've threaded up with some Madeira silver again to that little straight stitch, so that I can just do a few flashes of silver, and I'm not going to run all the way along, but I'd like that effect that you get. Again, I'm on a very small stitch, and what I'm going to do is just ease the tension, and then just, I'm not going backwards and forwards this time, I'm just going to maneuver up, and then I can cut all those jump threads afterwards, because I don't want whole long lines of this. I want flashes as you would get in the sea. So actually it's not very much on there, but that's kind of all I want. So I can go in and trim these off. Just a bit of bling. There we go. One more, just along the very top there, actually. I want it to be subtle, most unlike me. There we go. Not sure if the light is enough to kind of bounce it off here actually, but look, can you see there's just that little bit of glitter, which is kind of what I what I wanted. Okay, I'm thinking about it. I'm just going to leave that there because I think once I've got all the grasses going across, etc., you're not actually going to see an awful lot of this. So I'm going to move on now to the grasses. So let's take a little look at this grassy stitch. So it's actually in the quilt section. So I'm going through to the quilt section and then I can scroll through my pages. It's number 48, as I recall, on here. And there are several different grassy, as I would term them, stitches. So if you don't have this specific stitch, just this is the sort of thing you're looking for, something that's, you know, side to side. That's exactly the kind of thing, and there's an awful lot of them, and even on the most basic machines you've got some form of feathery stitch normally. So let's go into there. Now what you'll notice is that this looks quite narrow, and I've got the yellow on here which tells you that I've actually got a favourite stitch setting saved on my Atelier, and I'll explain why that is in a minute. But if I bring that up, I'm going to default on here. So this is the actual stitch as stitched out, the serving suggestion. Okay, what I want to do is I want to make it look much more organic, so I want to change the sizes of the stitches. Now there are a couple of ways of doing that. The easiest way when you're doing quite a lot of them, I find, is if I go up here, I can just do, this is the equivalent of memory. So if you're on another model, I'll put things up in the corner to show screens, etc. You would, to do one stitch at a time to set a stitch pattern, what you would actually do is one stitch memory, and record it. So on the Atelier, what we do is we press that button, and what that means is it's just going to put in one stitch at a time. Okay, so I'm going to put in 5 of those stitches. Now they're all narrow at the moment, so I'm going to use my arrow to go back so that I can change it. That's my preview. So what I want to do is change the width of that one on the bottom. So I'm going to bring that out much bigger. You can see this is why I'm using this screen, because you can kind of see obviously exactly what I'm doing. So I'm then going to go along to the next one and I'm going to take that up, but not quite as big. So I'm just going to take them up each one at a time so that the whole thing is looking much more realistic until I get to that narrow one at the top. So I've got 5 here. So if I show you in the preview, look, you can see it's looking much more grassy like. And because I'm going to do, I don't know, 12, 14 of these at least, this means I can just do this stitch pattern over and over and over again. Okay, and that's all remembered in there for me. So what I'm doing here, I'm on the 5270. So if your machine has a memory button like this is how you can actually make that little kind of stitch pattern here. So I need to find my stitch first of all. It's number 53 in mode 3. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 and number 52. So it's coming up on here, and what I've noticed is that the width setting is at 7. So the first thing I'm going to do is take that as small as I can. It's going to stop on 2.5. Then I press memory. My next stitch, again, still in the same mode, so I go to 52. Again, my width setting is there at 7. So I'm going to take that down. I'm going to take that to 3.5 and press memory. And I can continue doing this until I get it to look as organic as I want it to. So again, I'm going to go 52. I'm going to do about 6 now, memory. So I think I've got 4. I forgot to count. What I now want to do as well is I'm going to add a lock stitch on the end, which is in mode 4. So go down to mode 4, and that's stitch number 78. It will be different numbers, etc., depending on your model. But the same thing applies if you've got things like the M100, the M200, those kinds of machines, or the 4300 for example. So now I'm actually going to stitch it out. And then it's going to finish on that lock stitch, which means that I've got a memorized pattern on here. There we go. Okay, so I've got that now set so that I can start going on those. If you are on a machine where you do not have that option of memory, so you've got fewer stitches and you don't have a memory option, I'm trying desperately to remember which ones, but anyway, you'll know. What you can do is you can adjust the settings as you go. So I would start off narrow, and then I would just bit on the width setting to actually enlarge it as I go down. So I might do one stitch, then enlarge it slightly, do another stitch, enlarge it, do another stitch, enlarge it, do another stitch, enlarge it. Okay, if that makes sense. Right, so let's start work on these. Now, what I did while you weren't watching, so you didn't have to watch it, is I've kind of filled the back a little bit, and again I've just used that same straight stitch, and I've used a slightly lighter variegated colour than the one that's in now, because I just want to fill that background a little bit more as well, and I don't want to use the sort of very intense stitches because I want those at the front of my picture rather than towards the back. They're a bit blurry at the back, aren't they, with the paints and things like that. But I think you can see at this point that even if you have no stitches on your machine, apart from the very basic stuff, you can get a really nice picture going. So far we've only actually used the straight stitches, haven't we? So don't let it put you off, or if you're doing stuff with kids, this is a really nice thing to do with kids, maybe during the holiday. Get them sitting there. There's nothing nicer, is there, than dabbling with a bit of paints, crayons, etc. So we've set our stitch on the side, so we're going to start narrow at the top and then fatten out as we go down. So as I say, I've got that slightly darker colour in, and I'm not going to go all the way down to the bottom because I'm then going to put a stem on it as well. Okay, so if we start sewing here, and this is why it's quite nice to have that kind of setting of those stitches, because once I get to the end, and what you can do is you can go down after you've done your 5 stitches, you can add a lock stitch as well, which means that it's going to stop automatically at the end of those, so you don't have to worry. That lock stitch is fantastic for this kind of thing, and don't forget that you've got it. Okay, so that's my first one done. So look, you can see slightly darker colour. So off I go again, and I'm going to press B on my screen so that I know, but I've gone back to the beginning automatically because it's stitched out that memorised pattern for me. So that's where the memory does come in really useful. So I'm down to the bottom, and look, it's doing that little lock stitch for me, so I know that one's done. So that time spent doing, you know, programming those stitches in is going to be well worth it here, because we're going to do this stitch so many times. And if I wanted to, I can go in and add another stitch to the bottom of it, so I can do some slightly taller ones. I can stop a little bit sooner, so I've got some slightly shorter ones, that kind of thing, because as I say, we're about trying to make it look as different as possible so that it's more natural. So again, I'm going to just carry on with this and then show you what I've got so far. So that's the background to the grasses done. So now I'm going to go in and put some flowers on them. This is just a plain pink, but I've actually put a variegated, no surprise there, in. And I'm going to start just stitching down, and you'll see that they kind of just sit around what's going on. So I'm not going to manoeuvre terribly much, because if they stitch over the top of some of those leaves, it doesn't actually matter. So one whole stitch is sort of one at the top and then two at the side and one at the bottom. So I'm not necessarily going to do the whole thing. I might, you know, if there's a half of a star there, it actually doesn't matter on this, because that's what you'd get on a plant anyway, isn't it? So I might stop sort of a little bit previous on some of them, but look, you can see instantly how it starts to I love this I say this all the time, it's a favourite stitch, and then, you know, the next day there's another favourite stitch. It's a bit like your children, isn't it? One day you like one better than you like the others, depending on who's actually being more agreeable or not. But don't tell them I said that. So I'll run this one down, and then, as I say, I won't make you sit through this. I'm going to stop just on that one there on the bottom. Aren't they lovely? So now I'm on to that pebble stitch, and I've done the same thing of using the memory to put in two together, and this I've narrowed them down because obviously it's quite a small picture. So, and I've got a sort of a yellowy browny green variegated in here, so I'm going to do a few in that, and then I'm going to go in with the brown afterwards, just so I can mix up all the colours. Kind of wanted the yellow for the sort of sandy effect. So if you don't have a stitch like this, have a look. You might have something sort of circular. If not, then if you've had a go before, then this is the time to maybe free motion. I love a mix of both, to be honest, with the free motion and the fancy stitches as well, because they're doing very different things and giving very different effects. So I think sometimes it's really nice to actually mix it up and do that. So I'm going to come up into these, sort of the base of these flowers here. Oh, I think my bobbin's about to run out. Hang on, I'll pause it and swap the bobbin. So I'm just stacking these, so just kind of using the side of my foot to kind of run along, so that there's very little gap between the two rows that I'm doing. Actually, I don't know if I am going to need that other colour in there. Maybe not. Oh, I haven't gone up into here, have I? I've just remembered that, so let's go up into here. See, this is such good fun to do. I think very often with arty stuff, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I can't draw. Well, you know, there's ways of making it easier. Of making it, and like with all things, you know what, if you're enjoying doing it, it actually doesn't have to hang in the Royal Academy. But, you know, I think you'll be surprised at how easy it is to get some really, really good effects. So, you know, when everyone goes, oh, did you do that? Take the praise. Take the praise. Just say, yes, I did. Thank you. So I've just changed my thread again for a more sort of yellowy, much lighter, almost limey and lemon variegated. And I'm still doing that little pebbly stitch, but what I want to do is just under these flowers, because I remembered I've got that little French knot, the little star stitch as well. So just in the interest of completing the Stitch Bingo challenge, I'm just filling this a little bit more, and then I think what I'm going to do is put in some blue so that I can do some little, and I think I'm making this up now, I'm going to have to check with my I Spy book of British beaches, but some little, I don't know, periwinkle blue flowers maybe in amongst here. So once again I've changed my mind, because I think I'm just going to put a few in amongst the pink actually. So I'm on to that star stitch, and remember I can cut away the jumps in between so they won't be attached. So as I say, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get in and cut through those little jump leads, the jump threads in between those little stars, then go in the back so that I can pull them through. So basically, so there we go. Are you exhausted watching that? I did speed up a fair bit. So what I have done, and I would advise you to perhaps think ahead and measure things before you do this. I just, as you can see, I only just managed to get this finished one into a hoop. I'm a great fan of hoops as frames, basically, for anything that you do that's stitched. So here it is finished. I've used a micron pen here, Pigma pen, just to put a couple of little birds in the background, and I've signed it because it's my work of art. So frankly, as I say, I'm going to take that. So I'm hoping that you might have a go at this. I would absolutely love to see anything. It doesn't matter what size you do. I would absolutely love to see anything that you do. If you're at Festival of Quilts at the beginning of August, Janome will be there on the stand, so do, if you've done anything, please do come and show us what you've done. We'd absolutely love to see it, and I'll see you at the end of August.